standing on podiums talking about help me save the lion, the rhino, the elephant, whatever it may be, and then I'd go and have a burger. And I thought, my God, the hypocrisy of that is suddenly hit me. And I was like, wow, I'm asking you to save this species and then cook and serve that one for me. So I just thought, I'm out of here. And I cut everything. I'm 100% vegan in so much. There's that whole discussion around plant-based or vegan. Vegan being cutting everything out of anything animal-based. I don't wear wool. I don't eat honey. I absolutely removed animal products from my life to the greatest extent possible. And I've done so to prevent that phenomenon from happening where you talk about your cause, and there are those folks, unfortunately, it's a part of human nature, that if you highlight your cause, you're inadvertently highlighting their lack of one, and their response to that is to try and discredit you, to knock you down a bit, which is easily done if you're wearing a leather jacket and saying, help me save the animals. So I just remove all of those possibilities. But it also underlined to me, it really helps me to not be judgmental with people, because there I think I was about 45 when I went vegan, and I'm an animal lover, patron for animal charities, eating animals. So how hypocritical of me would it also be to then say to people, right, that decision that's just taken me 45 years to make, you need to make it right now, otherwise you're a bad person.
I've got a fabulous competition from one of our past guests, the amazing Chicken. They're giving 10 lucky winners a product from their meat-free range. All you have to do to enter is enter your name and email address and be a subscriber, and it's only available in the US and the UK. Oh, and thanks Pete for this lovely t-shirt. Now back to the show.
Hi there and welcome to Plant CEO. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome Dan Richardson, the filmmaker. He's also an actor and a patron for many animal charities and foundations such as Born Free and Nature Watch. Hey Dan, how are you doing?
And Ant, great to see you. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me to the premiere of your new documentary, Food for Thought.
Hey, thank you so much for being there. What a night that was. We were so lucky with the turnout we had, and the energy in the space was just beautiful. I mean, you know, premiere is a fun thing to be at, but you don't get to choose how the energy goes. And it was wonderful. Such a wonderful night.
Yeah, it was amazing. And it was great to see so many people there who had contributed, the stars of the show, other people in the industry, a few people that I know. And it was great to do the red carpet interview with you afterwards as well. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So tell me about the inspiration behind creating the film in the first place, just for people who haven't maybe seen it yet.
Sure. So as you kindly introduced me, I've been an actor and a filmmaker for actually quite a relatively short space of time given my age. I got into it very late in life. I started out acting, and then I quickly realized that I had a passion for the creative process of filmmaking as well. And very quickly, that all merged into the other part of my life, which is the animal welfare, animal conservation. And I realized, well, we have this incredible privilege with the medium of film. It's such a luxury and a privilege to be able to create something that has such an impact on people. I mean, who doesn't love film? This medium that gives us the ability to do something, and to do something meaningful and make a difference. You could just make, and there's nothing wrong with it, of course, you could just make films for the sake of entertainment, and they're great, and it's a wonderful thing to do too. And I've been lucky enough to be involved in that as well. But as things evolved in my career, I realized that with having the gear that I have, and we were just having a conversation about our camera gear before we went live, and I realized that when I have all the gear and I've got the microphones and I've got the desire to make something, why not make it something meaningful? And obviously, over the years, I worked with and met and became friends with Giles Alderson, who's my co-producer director on Food for Thought, and he has the very same mentality as me. And we just want to make things that are, to the greatest extent possible anyway, because it's not always the case. We've got to make a living as well. But when we have the choice, it's about making something that's meaningful, that serves a purpose, that is part of a cause, and that can make a difference in the world. And so with that in mind, we had always discussed doing something. And initially, the film idea started out as being what you'll have seen in the film, which is a fundamental part of it, which is those vegan participants, people who go vegan for a 30-day period, and then literally just provide us with video diaries of their experience. That was literally the first and only idea. I don't think it was ever designed to just be that, because I don't think you could really make a feature-length documentary of just people saying, oh, you know, today I ate this and I struggled with that and I missed the other. But it's from that we developed the entire concept of the film, and it grew. It evolved from what was originally called The Vegan Experiment, which would have been a terrible title because it would have turned a lot of people off who aren't interested, at least not knowingly interested in the vegan lifestyle. And so, it just grew from there and became the film that you kindly came to the premiere and saw.
It was quite nice to see that reality of those people who are going on that journey as probably you and I also went on the similar journey when we decided to, go vegan as well. And to hear those truths, people saying they loved eating meat and they were apprehensive. And then afterwards, seeing that realization of actually just making the connection with the animal, which most people don't when they see it, an item in a supermarket, for example, total disassociation from an individual, which is the animal.
Yeah, and it's designed that way, isn't it? We have to acknowledge that we're all susceptible to it because it's the life we live. We're born into a world that before we're even making conscious decisions or choices of our own, we're being fed animal product. So it's very hard to grow up in that world and to think that there's something wrong with it. And especially given how hidden the horrors are and how the whole system is designed, as you said, you walk into a supermarket, you're not seeing what even appears to be the byproduct of an animal. You're just seeing something that looks like a tasty dinner. And so it does take some, I don't know how to describe it best, but because, as per the film, I'm very, very cautious about sounding judgmental or preachy or for any moment vilifying the people who choose to eat meat, because I was that guy for quite some time. And it's a very significant and very distinct shift I found in consciousness where I went from thinking, well, what's the big deal? And I was always an animal lover, so coming from me, who stood on podiums talking on behalf of animals, to then suddenly realizing the hypocrisy of what I'd been doing. So how can I vilify other people for making the same choices that I made?
Yeah. How did you go about selecting the people who appeared, change their diets basically for that period of time? And is there any stories of those individuals, maybe one of the individuals that you'd like to highlight?
To answer the first part of your question, we just put it out on social media. We're really lucky, aren't we, with social media these days? Although it can be quite a toxic place, it does have its purposes. Unfortunately, over the years, I've collected a group of people who, more than anything, are connected to me through social media because of their love for animals and their focus on animal welfare and conservation as well. So it's an echo chamber in one way, but it's also very useful in the sense that it gives me access to and gave me access to those people where I could just plonk it out on Facebook and Twitter and wherever else and just say, hey, we're looking for a group of people who would be willing to do this. And we had dozens of responses. We had a lot more responses than we thought we'd get, actually. And indeed, a lot more responses than we could have ever put in the film, which that was a difficult part of the process, was choosing who had the most whole beginning to end story that we could then translate into a character in the film, if you like. And so they found us. Once we put that request out, we had a really wonderful group of people from all sorts of different backgrounds as far as where they lived and who they were, perhaps most interestingly, what their current eating habits entailed. So we had, as you saw, people who introduced themselves by saying, hey, you know what, I love meat. It's my favorite thing and I'll have it as often as I possibly can. And then my second favorite thing is cheese. And so they went into it and they knew it was going to be really difficult. And then at the same time, we had people who had been vegetarian for 40 years. And that, in theory, is just that one little tiny extra step. But
yeah,
we couldn't make any assumptions. That we had preconceived ideas, I think we all do, going into it and thinking, there's no way he's going to stay vegan. There's no way this person's going to be able to stick it out. And I think that was one of the luckiest things that we experienced, because we did have such an eclectic group of people respond to the 30-day challenge, that we had that really lovely breadth of individuals. And the whole point of it is how relatable that is, that anybody can watch that film and probably relate to somebody from amongst our vegan participants. And whether that's because of, they just resonate with them on a personal level, or that's exactly me. I love meat. I have meat 3 times a day, or I really struggle with not having milk in tea and coffee, those sorts of things. And we've got people across the spectrum there, which is wonderful. To answer the second part of your question, I do find it amazing how you can go into that process and think, that it fits that person perfectly. They're going to love it, and that person's never going to stick with it. They won't even get through the month. And I'm not going to spoil any surprises, but it doesn't always turn out the way we expected.
Yeah. So we won't give anything away then on that front.
I guess it wouldn't be too much a case of giving stuff away, but it's just, I think it's fair to say, when you see these people introduce themselves and they set their stall out and say, this is who I am and this is what I eat today, and this is how I feel going into this 30-day challenge, you could easily think to yourself, there's no way that's going to change that person's mindset in 30 days.
Yeah.
And as you've seen, in some cases, it absolutely does.
Yeah. And I love the way you guys had balanced, I guess, the humour and the seriousness throughout the show. And typically, most documentaries that are talking about veganism, climate change, sustainability, all those topics combined into one, are usually quite serious and perhaps a bit depressing for people. And also when they're showing animals getting slaughtered, it turns certain people away.
Of course.
So let's talk about the humour side first of all, and then we'll talk about the other bit. How did you come up with just making it lighter, I would say, and effectively easier to watch, and in my opinion would pull in more of an audience actually.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, that's a huge tick in the box for us, because that's what it was designed to do. I mean, it was a kind of a two-pronged approach, and a decision that came from two different focuses. One of which was we wanted to be different. We wanted the film, like you said, you can almost talk about films from the genre, specifically documentaries in the vegan, plant-based genre. It is a serious subject matter because it deals with climate change, it deals with animal slaughter, it deals with some things that aren't remotely funny. And I have to say, quite honestly, it was an idea that evolved as the film itself evolved, and the balance was important to get right, because you have to respect the fact that we're dealing with serious subject matter. But exactly as you said, the reason that we really found that it was important to, from a just being different, other than if we were to just create another film that just fits into the same category, it's like, okay, well done.
Yeah.
It could have been anything that already exists.
Yeah, you need something unique, don't you?
You want something a little bit different, but more than anything, it was exactly what you just said. It was that we wanted it to be relatable to people. We wanted to give, ultimately, the whole concept of the film is find all the reasons why someone might not watch it, and then try and take that reason away, just so they stick around. And like I said, when I said it was originally in our heads a working title of The Vegan Experiment, that's the first example of where we said, hang on a sec, I know you'd watch it because you already agree with me, and you think, oh, this is great. It's going to it's like the echo chamber we talked about on social media.
Exactly.
But if I want people to watch it who aren't already bought into the idea of veganism, and who wouldn't even imagine they'd contemplate the idea of a vegan diet or vegan lifestyle, I guarantee by calling it The Vegan Experiment, the vast majority of those people would have just scrolled on by. They'd look for something else. They'd be like, oh, why would I watch that? Same as I wouldn't watch something about hunting because it doesn't interest me. In fact, it disgusts me. And so we'd lose an audience by doing that.
That's interesting.
It was a continuation of that. It was just, let's try to make it enjoyable. Let's let people know as early as possible, which is, as you know, it opens that way. Let people know that they're allowed to enjoy the film. That's what.
Well, you definitely did that, and you did a great job at that. And I really like your camaraderie between you and Giles.
Thank you.
So that was quite nice to see. I mean, it's funny when you say a vegan experiment, because obviously, there was that series on Netflix, A Twin Experiment, as you know. Yeah. And I'm wondering how that did, because I still speak to people. I think some people have seen it that I asked, but I'm not sure how much viewership it got compared to some of the other documentaries that are out there. And perhaps the word experiment isn't the best to use.
I think over time, we'll probably see those where you see a list of films that have swayed people to go vegan. And that, I think it was called You Are What You Eat, if I'm not mistaken, the one on...
That's right. You Are What You Eat, A Twin Experiment. Yeah.
There we go.
With Louis Fissoyas, who directed it. Yeah.
And I suspect in the long run, over time, it may already exist, in fact, we'll see where surveys are done, where people are asked, oh, what made you go vegan? And of course, a portion of those, of the total, will say, oh, it was a film. And then you could take that section of the vegan community and say, which film was it?
Exactly.
And there will be people, and this is an important, really important reality, is that there'll be people, I think in the past it was certainly the majority, would say, oh, it was Earthlings. Earthlings did it. So you rightly pointed out, we stayed away from slaughterhouse footage or any graphic imagery of any kind. Earthlings is the opposite. Earthlings is essentially shock tactics, and it's an amazing, incredibly difficult film to watch, but it made a lot of people go vegan, if people are so inclined to watch it. And I think that over time we'll see, and hopefully Food for Thought will be on that list as well, where people will say, I went vegan because I saw Earthlings, or I saw The Game Changers, or I saw You Are What You Eat, or I saw Food for Thought.
Yeah.
The point that makes, which is crucial, is that there's a place for everything, because we're all different, right? We're all responding to different things.
It's also like, I think you need that reconfirming message in your journey, so you'll be ready to watch those things. So I think it adds up to the whole collection of points till you get that realization. What was the film that did it for you?
It actually wasn't the film that did it for me. It was a sudden realization of the hypocrisy that I was a living example of, because, as I said, so as my acting career, and I don't want to use the term took off, because it's like, most people don't even know me as an actor, but I've had some good fortune in acting, and I did in particular, the highest profile thing I did, which is by no means super high profile, but I did a Disney TV series a few years ago, I think it was about 10 years ago now. And when that happened, I'd already been asked to be an ambassador or a patron for a number of animal charities, but when I was in the Disney TV series and it was higher profile, higher visibility, then I got asked by a few more people to be a patron or an ambassador. So I found myself speaking out for animals a lot.
What was the TV series, by the way?
It was called The Lodge. It was a
Okay.
great series. It was, I mean, if you'd want to be somewhere between 8 and 14 years of age to enjoy it, but it was, great to be involved in it. A couple of years, we did it for 2 seasons, very successful, and they actually shut it down after 2 seasons, which I tend to think is the right thing to do. It's like Ricky Gervais did with The Office.
Yeah.
Leave people wanting more rather than run it dry kind of thing.
What was your character?
My character was the bad guy,
Oh, wow.
but in Disney, the bad guy is just a guy who wears a suit and has a bit of a harsh parting in his hair, which I still had back then. He wasn't a really bad guy, but essentially the antagonist of the
Right,
series,
okay.
and also the father of one of the main leads in the show. So it was kind of, all the dynamics that go on with family. So it was great. It was great fun.
Nice.
Met some great people.
Yeah.
And again, it sort of gave me a platform, slightly bigger platform from which I was able to spread my message, which is my purpose in life, the animal welfare, animal conservation efforts that I make. So yeah, it was that realization that when I was initially doing that, standing on podiums talking about help me save the lion, the rhino, the elephant, whatever it may be, and then I'd go and have a burger. And I thought, my God, the hypocrisy of that is suddenly hit me. And I was like, wow, I'm asking you to save this species and then cook and serve that one for me. So I just thought, I'm out of here. I'm going to, and I cut everything. I'm 100% vegan in so much. There's that whole discussion around plant-based or vegan. Vegan being cutting everything out of anything animal-based. I don't wear wool. I don't eat honey. I absolutely removed animal products from my life to the greatest extent possible. And I've done so to prevent that phenomenon from happening where you talk about your cause, and there are those folks, unfortunately, it's a part of human nature, that if you highlight your cause, you're inadvertently highlighting their lack of one, and their response to that is to try and discredit you, to knock you down a bit, which is easily done if you're wearing a leather jacket and saying, help me save the animals. So I just remove all of those possibilities. But it also underlined to me, it really helps me to not be judgmental with people, because there I think I was about 45 when I went vegan, and I'm an animal lover, patron for animal charities, eating animals. So how hypocritical of me would it also be to then say to people, right, that decision that's just taken me 45 years to make, you need to make it right now, otherwise you're a bad person. Which lends itself really well to the vibe of food for thought, being
Yeah.
non-judgmental.
Totally, and I think we definitely can learn from that. As you know, if there's people are watching who are animal activists, I think you need a scale, don't you? You need people who are able to be on the front line, say the hard truth,
Yep.
but then you've got to be able to take somebody on a journey and not
Right.
switch them off, and not just
Agreed.
hate vegans. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
That doesn't
100%.
that doesn't do our cause any justice. I've gone on to Leicester Square, held up the screens, to show the footage, Cube of Truth, and it's an experience. And I think when they say, they give you a briefing before you go on to say, well, our case is that if anyone asks, should they take it as a phased approach? The answer is no, because every time you extend that period, more animals are dying, right? That's their message. And I think
Right.
then when you watch documentaries, you need to bring people in, or when you're having a discussion with a friend of yours, you've got to take it in some ways, baby steps. So I think there's a place for everything. I think there's a place for the hard truths, for the people that haven't, just need that a little bit of more of a push. Do you know what I mean?
I agree.
But
100%.
yeah, yeah. And I think what I found the most powerful part in the documentary was when you had to watch that footage. And you could see how emotional it was for you, having never watched, right? You had never watched any sort of
Never watched it.
animal slaughter.
Never
You
watched it.
sort of, if you saw something coming on, you would just turn away, right? Is that
100%.
pretty much what
Every
happened?
time.
What footage did you actually watch?
Yeah, I asked Giles that question because Giles set that up. And Giles Alderson, my friend, co-director, co-producer,
Yeah.
as you saw in the film, we actually discuss it. We discuss it in the context of deciding not to use slaughterhouse footage or graphic imagery in the film at all, but
Yeah.
in the process of discussing that, we discussed the possibility of me watching it so that people wouldn't have to watch it, wouldn't have to hear it. Again, back to that whole idea of let's not give people a reason to switch off, because they'd have done exactly what you just described me doing, is just to scroll on by, just don't want to see it. That's exactly human nature for you. And so it's like, well, now you don't see it, you don't hear it, you just see the impact it has on me. I asked Giles that question actually because that question's come up a lot. Is what were you watching? And I don't know. I thought it was a clip from Dominion, which is another one of the documentaries like Earthlings and like Land of Hope
Yes.
and Glory. Again, and I agree with you 100%, by the way. There's a place for all of it. There's a need for all of it. you have to just be, it has to be authentic to you, and what's authentic to us is this, and that's as close as we wanted to get to it. And I said to Giles, what was it? Was it because thinking it was Dominion, and he said it was just something he found on YouTube. And I mean, unfortunately,
Yeah.
there's no shortage of that kind of footage. It's
No.
one of those undercover exposés.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually, one of the videos that led my journey was a video on YouTube as well called "Dairy is Scary."
horrendous.
Did you watch that one?
No, but I'm aware of exactly the footage you're talking about. And again,
Yeah.
I can't watch it because I'm already engaged, and
Yeah.
I can't unsee that stuff. And
Yeah.
like you said, for some people, that will be the trigger they need, the push they need.
Me personally, because I was, born a vegetarian, and in a way to learn about the dairy industry in that way was basically the shot tactic that then led me to a journey to then
Yeah.
do my own research, watch more documentaries, and
you
then discover, and then I did drop the milk. I wasn't consuming eggs, but I dropped the milk, and then cheese came soon afterwards. You kind of have to just stop having cheese for like a month.
The cravings, yeah. Well, that's
The
the thing people
cravings.
don't understand about cheese, because that's one of the primary things people say. Oh, I don't know about giving up cheese. It's the same as coffee with caffeine. Cheese has in it casein. It's a chemical which is addictive, and that's why people. And it's a real thing. It's craving cheese is the same as craving coffee or caffeine. And as you say, once you've laid off it for a few weeks or a month, that craving goes away. It's same as sugar. These things are addictive, and they're not very good for us. But I get it completely. And I have to say,
Yeah.
vegan cheeses are getting a whole lot better these days.
Oh yeah, definitely, and they've really improved. And obviously now there's Dairy 2.0, which is effectively taking those casein protein blocks and putting it into precision fermentation, which is growing that as you would ferment any other types of fermented products
Yeah.
without the animal. So
go.
there will be a time, and it's available now. It's all about scaling effectively those technologies, but it won't be long before they'll be mainstream, and then people would forget.
Precisely.
Yeah, hopefully, we'll move away from the way animals are treated. I wanted to ask you a bit more about, I guess, you personally. Are you kind of quite a spiritual person?
Yeah. About God, time flies, doesn't it? So I think it's about 20
Yeah.
years ago I got on the spiritual path. I was living. Yeah, in fact, it is about 21 years ago. I found myself living in Canada. I went and lived in Vancouver. I was doing some work over there for about 3 years, and that was probably by coincidence. It's nothing to do with Vancouver specifically, but I kind of fell into a place psychologically and mentally, and I was just ready to start taking steps on my own spiritual journey, let's call it. I know that sounds a bit fluffy, but I guess that's what it is. And I got into meditation, and I started to just like you described vegetarianism, veganism, exploring more, researching more when your time comes, when it's the right time for you. And that's what happened with me and spirituality. And I got pretty heavily into it, in so much as I've been on that path for about 20 years now. Yeah. And it's a huge part of my life.
Nice. And what do you practice?
Well, I have practiced many different types of meditation, including one of probably the hardest things I've ever done, which was Vipassana meditation, where if you've heard of it.
No, what's that?
Vipassana, wow, it's incredibly intense. Well, at least for me it was. I think, again, this is just underlining that fact that people are different, and some people would probably find it really enjoyable. It's incredibly intense. I found it. It's a 10-day silent meditation retreat. What I didn't realize going into it was that it's not just silence. It's you arrive, they give you a briefing, a couple of hundred people there, at least in my case there were. They give you a briefing, and in that briefing they say, okay, so there's no eye contact, there's no physical contact, there's no books, no newspapers, no phones, no nothing. It takes literally everything away, no exercise even.
You're not even doing things like yoga, for
Nope.
example?
No.
No, you don't even do that, right?
No. So Vipassana is all about literally removing all distraction. And the aim of Vipassana meditation is to reach a state of equanimity. In other words, no agitation in the up or down direction, with being super excited and happy or being super low. And I think one of the things about the spiritual path is you find what resonates with you, and perhaps this is what didn't resonate with me, because the ups and downs of life are the colour in a way, and I know people,
Yeah.
and I have to say I do envy them to an extent, where people are not affected by their external circumstances. I mean, what an incredible place to reach! But
Yeah.
it's done with Vipassana meditation. It was fascinating. The approach of it is that you sit absolutely still. So, on the contrary to doing things like yoga, you're sitting still for up to an hour and a half at a time. None of us do that, and you don't realize how much we shuffle and move when we have discomfort. And the reason that you don't move is to feel the discomfort and to accept it as your temporary reality, which will pass, but to just accept it. And use that pain, which for me would always come in my lower back. I would sit and I would just start to hurt, ache, and it would just hone down into this tiny little golf ball sized, incredibly intense pain in the lower back, just because I wasn't moving. I wasn't just anything, we just shuffle from side to side, even when we're standing talking like this. And you don't do that. You just feel the pain and accept it as a temporary reality and use it as a metaphor for life. And you do it for 10 days. It was tough.
Oh my days.
It was tough. I remember it being one of the hardest things I ever did. And I was sharing a room with a guy after the briefing. So we walked in, there was no conversation, no talking, no, hey man, which side of the room suits you better? Is it cool with you if I go shower now? You would just do stuff and it all worked. Didn't talk to him for 9 days. And this guy, I remember it was quite funny. This guy looked to me, he looked Tibetan. And when we used to have like morning and lunchtime breaks, I would see him sat there looking like he was still meditating. And I was just so impressed with this guy and almost frustrated because I found it so hard. And I'm watching this guy just sit there, just staring at his teacup like he's meditating even when he doesn't have to be. And then on day 10 at lunchtime, the silence thing is lifted and you can actually talk. And for the first time, I'm actually talking to this guy I've shared a room with for a week and a half. And I said to him, dude,
That's so bizarre.
So bizarre. And I said to him, I have to tell you, I said, I was actually inspired by you because I was just watching you. And like I gave him an example and said, I remember you just sitting, just staring at your teacup, meditating when you didn't have to. He said, I wasn't meditating. He said, I was looking at it thinking how much I wanted to smash it over someone's head.
That's brilliant.
So that was quite an eye-opener.
I'm glad it wasn't your head.
Yeah, exactly. It's just funny.
This guy is making so much noise in the shower.
Yeah, it was just so funny because we got this perception of someone else's experience, but actually their experience is very different from what we think it is.
Oh yeah.
I've done things like that, and I've done. Trying to think of the name of there's one of the names has escaped me where you do a lot of sort of movement, dancing, and then you stettle. Very famous one. I can't even, for some reason the name has slipped my mind. And it'll come back to me sometime later in the podcast, and I'll just throw it in.
Yeah. So, and now, what would be your daily practice when you do meditation?
I try when I'm being good about it, which I haven't been lately. I'll get up and I'll do an hour. I'll get straight out of bed. I'll come into my living room. I'll put a little blanket over me and just sit and meditate first thing in the morning. And what I've tried to do... And do you say
a mantra, or do you
I have very,
blank out,
sometimes...
Or...
Yeah, well, often what I'll just try and do is just be utterly still and just allow, that whole concept, which I find very difficult as well, because by no means am I good at this, I would say. It's hard to talk about meditation in terms of being good or bad, because it's just whatever your experience is. But that whole concept of just observing thoughts rather than associating or identifying with them, which I find incredibly difficult, but I'll try and do that.
That's a bit like TM, isn't it? Transcendental meditation, where you let the thought come in.
Yeah.
You accept the thought and then you let it go out, right? Sort of.
Yeah, and I guess that's again that Vipassana meditation that I talked about, where you're using pain as that thing to observe and not judge and let it go or not go, as the case may be with pain. And and so I'll just try and be still as much as possible. But what I've realized I've been doing in latter years is trying to integrate that into my everyday with things like walking somewhere. And I'll be on a train. A lot of the time, if I'm on a train, not that I have to do it very often, but if I'm on a train heading up into London, where it's almost like the contrast serves you, where you can, if you look around, most people are buried in a newspaper or a phone, and there's nothing meditative about that, and certainly I don't think it helps us, that kind of thing. So I detached from that decades ago. I've even trained myself not to look at the headlines of other people's newspapers because it's all you need to see sometimes. And I'll sit and just look out the window, listen to really chilled out spa music kind of thing. And the contrast between me and the rest of the people in the train carriage really helps me to feel a kind of a sense of peace and calm. Probably not a great way to go about it, because obviously what we're, I suppose, in a way trying to achieve is a sense of oneness and achieving a sense of separation that serves me quite well in those scenarios. But I try and make it part of my day to day. Yeah, at the gym that's awesome. At the gym.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about that oneness, especially with animals, because I feel that animals are highly more living in the present than humans do. they're using all their senses. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they worry about what's happening in the past or the future, and they just live in the now. They've either got to be hungry, they've got to protect their family, they've got to survive, they've got to have fun, right? I mean, that's the other. They play, but they don't worry about stuff that's going on outside of their control. They're present all the time, and there's a lot of learning that I think we can do from animals in that way.
I completely agree in it, and I'm sure you've read Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah, the power of now, and
the way he talks about that, and he uses the analogy of ducks having a little squabble on the lake, and then all of a sudden everything's calm, and they're not thinking they've now got a grudge with that duck over there. They've sorted out the problem and they get it. But I think you're absolutely right. He also talks about, if you ask an eagle what time it is, I mean, obviously you're not going to do that because of the slight difficulty of language, but equally, if you could, an eagle is just going to say, well, it's now, of course, what else is there?
Yeah.
Because that's all they have. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think we see that incredibly powerfully demonstrated by dogs, because dogs, and I dare say all animals, but particularly dogs, because of our close association with them and theirs with us, where you see, I'm sure you've seen many examples of it, where dogs have been abused and rescued, and you see what love does. And the fact that they're not holding a grudge. I have a rescue dog, and of course their traits are such that it's inbuilt in them. If they've lived a really harsh experience, of course they'll have a memory of that, but they don't hold you to account for it. And humans could learn an awful lot from animals in that way. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, and what's really exciting that I think we'll start to see maturing in the next few years is the ability for interspecies communication. So there's a company called Zulingua, I think it's called, and they are working specifically to understand and talk to dogs. So the movie Up?
Yes.
The Disney movie?
The animated movie.
The animated movie. Yeah. Or maybe it was Pixar, but yeah, same group. But they had a dog in there called Doug, and Doug had this little collar. And he could communicate with the owner, and you could communicate back. So effectively that scenario is what they're working on, using AI. And there's other companies that are looking at brain patterns, as you can do now with humans, but analysing brain waves in species and understanding what they're saying, which will be amazing.
Absolutely. What's really fascinating about that is that, of course, we're already some way there. Like it's a standard thing, isn't it? Is that we have animals that know their names.
Yeah, they can understand the recall, or we've taught sign language to apes, for example.
Yeah, there's this kind of understanding of the fact that there is an understanding between us, and there is a level to which they already understand our language and we understand theirs. What I'm really interested to see is, as that develops, and the obvious one is dogs, of course, because we interact with them more than any other species in that way. One of the things that Food for Thought did was it put people in the proximity of the animals that they'd normally eat, and from that proximity they realised those animals are the same as a dog or a cat.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just that we haven't dubbed them that way. We don't perceive them that way. Again, that's just purely down to conditioning, but I'm really interested to see how that will evolve with all of them. Cows, pigs, sheep, even chickens. It's incredible to think what that could do in terms of sentience and connections and understanding.
Yeah, for sure. And in the documentary, we already spoke about the participants you had, but you've also had a great number of other guests that you had on the show. And, Ethan Brown from Beyond Meat, for example, Marte Rimac, we already spoke about that during the premiere. Who were the highlights for you in terms of who you had on? And
that's
yeah.
I'd have to say all of them because
they're all great.
I'm not just swerving your question either and trying to avoid saying a favourite. I think because they all brought so much. I mean, Marte Rimac is such a good example, which I can specify. It's one of my favourite sound bites from the whole movie. Here's a guy, for those who don't know him, Marte Rimac is a genius, basically. He's an inventor of the Rimac Automobili, which is an electric car, and in fact, is subsequent to the filming of Food for Thought, has been purchased by Bugatti. And if I'm not mistaken, certainly recently it was the case, and it may have been superseded now, but not to my knowledge, is that he was the creator of the fastest road car on Earth, which is now a Bugatti-owned Rimac Automobili.
Yeah, it's the one that Hammond also crashed on Top Gear, I think it was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so going back a few years now.
Wow.
Yeah, he kind of lost control of the car. But that was due to his driving ability versus the car.
Yeah, probably.
When you have a powerful car like that, you have to be careful, right?
Oh, my God. I'm embarrassed to say, as we discussed on the red carpet, I have a Tesla.
Yeah.
Embarrassed for obvious reasons now. I bought it before we realised just what a lunatic he was. But In fact, I bought it because I'm vegan, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah, because of the animal. Yeah. And actually, I was looking at that as well. Him aside, the product is still good, right? Do you know what I mean?
It's great.
Yeah.
But it's
Just
just
the way.
unfortunate. You don't want to be contributing to his wealth or driving around in an advert
True.
for his product. But
Yeah.
that aside, what we have the point I was going to make about the Tesla, by the way, is it's so scarily fast.
Yes.
As are most electric cars.
Yeah.
And so, to think of the fastest one, it's just the speeds are terrifying. But Mate created this car. He's one of the most significant, if not the biggest employer in Croatia, and indeed one of the most successful exporters in Croatia with this car. So very successful, very respected guy. His entire livelihood is based on creating an electric car and selling it. And we have a soundbite from him, which is one of my favorite parts of the whole film, in fact, where he says, we put all this time and money and resource and effort into making cars pollute the planet less than they do, but you can have a much bigger impact just by reducing your meat consumption. And as he says in the film, it's so much easier because rather than trying to change an entire industry, you're just making a different choice every single time you eat.
Driving an electric car has an incredibly smaller impact on the world than just reducing the meat consumption. So I speak often at events for the industry and for the leaders of the industry and so on. There's so much money and so much intellectual power being poured into making cars less polluting the planet. But it's so small and so incremental. If just a fraction of that would be invested into making people understand the impacts of their choices when it comes to diet, it would have a much bigger impact and much easier because you just have to change one habit and not change the whole industry.
To have a guy, again, to reiterate what I just said, whose literal livelihood is creating and selling electric cars, saying, it's a lot more powerful, it has a much bigger impact to just reduce your meat consumption or cut it out completely. I love that. But it's true of every single one of them, like Philip Limbury from Compassion in World Farming, just an absolutely amazing guy, just overflowing with statistics and knowledge and compassion and all the things that make him and make Compassion in World Farming what it is. And every one of our guests, they just bring so much to it, and they bring so much to it. Like we've got those higher profile people, like you said, and Ethan Brown is a good example, and hearing his journey, the driving forces behind him creating Beyond Meat, which is fascinating in itself, and what they're doing, which is incredible. And then we've got the likes of Roy and Claire, who are just the two folks who the public wouldn't know. They're not high profile people, but they're perhaps some of the most high profile and impactful stories that are shared in our film in terms of the health benefits they've derived from going plant-based or vegan. Not just life-changing, life-saving for those guys. So I love it all. I mean, it's just invaluable, and they all bring something different, and collectively they just increase the relatability of the film, and that's what it was all about for us. That's what the humor's about. That's what the breadth of guests, of vegan participants, that's what it's all about, is making it relatable, and again, not giving people a reason to switch off and move along, because we want them to watch the film.
Yeah, and it's good to get musicians in there as well, like Tanya, and was it Derek? It was
Derek, from Sepultura,
Yeah, they were great.
Yeah, and they're such totally different backgrounds. Derek from America and Tanya from Ireland, and he's a lead singer of a metal band. And she's a bass guitarist, a touring guitarist who plays with, the likes of Whitesnake and all the big bands. I mean, we've got a clip of her playing in front of thousands of people, and this thing that just brings them all together. In this case, the vegan movement, where they just have the same... There's no reason in the world they'd have even connected and met, but they know each other, and they have... Derek and Tanya do a huge amount of work together in terms of the plant-based movement and advocating for it. And we know them through Jim Greenbaum, who's another one of our guests, the founder of the Greenbaum Foundation, who, again, talk about a lovely soundbite. Here's a guy who says, he introduces himself and refers to himself as a guy who used to make a lot of money and now officially loses it in the non-profit world, trying to make the world a better place. What an amazing guy. And he just brings so much in his way to the film. And I just think that we're so lucky to have had all the folks we had more. Actually, it's so difficult, because editing a film, there's always going to be those moments that you can't.
Did you film those more clips?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Anything you'd like to mention, like as in, wish we'd included this, or?
I mean, there's too many to mention but we interviewed a rapper in Croatia and a chap actually who's just an advocate. He was the epitome of a man's man, carnivore, meat eater. Absolutely, he used to slaughter his own animals, and something happened with him, and we had an amazing conversation with him. We had a couple lined up that we didn't get to film because of the pandemic, which was a very well-known footballer who's vegan. We wanted to interview Louis Sahoyas. Louis was a guest on my podcast. In fact, he was the second ever guest on my podcast called Food for Thought Live. For those who don't know Louis, he's the guy the Oscar-winning director of The Cove, and subsequently the Game Changers movie, the vegan documentary with the world's strongest man and Lewis Hamilton and Novak Djokovic and stuff. We wanted to interview him, but so our footballer was in Italy and Louis in Los Angeles, and those at the time were the two epicenters of the pandemic. So those plans had to be cancelled for a year, and then by the time we could do it, everything had moved on past that point. But the point is, with any of those folks that we either did film and couldn't use or didn't get around to filming, all of it was gold. All of it was so valuable. But this is one of the hardest parts about editing a film: is that we'd have a 3-hour movie if we'd have kept it all in, and no one's going to watch a 3-hour movie. So you kind of have to be really brutal with the cuts you make. It was really hard. Yeah. Horrible.
I think also, Louis come on a couple of times on my podcast as well, and I think he said, and James Wilkes said, they had so much content when they filmed The Game Changers, they could have made it into a series as well.
There you go. There you go.
So I think they are working on a part 2. I think that was confirmed, but I'm not sure when. Yeah, we definitely need that, right? We need more of those. Those ones focused on the athletes,
Yeah, absolutely.
Which you did have, right? You had a lot around the bodybuilders, the endurance ultra marathon,
that's right.
runners. They were great. So you did talk about that a lot as well.
Yeah, we tried to, and this is again where it was kind of a case of what helps us tell the story and creates that through line. Because ultimately what you could say about Food for Thought, albeit a very different experience to The Game Changers or to any other documentary that's out there, essentially what it does is it's a couple of buddies to go out and explore the driving forces behind the global vegan phenomenon and discover that, to no one's surprise, it's either the animal welfare side, the environment, or the personal health side of it. And so we wanted to have a diversity of people across the breadth of those different driving forces who say, this is why I did it, this is how it's affected me. And it's just, so we're so lucky that we got all those folks, and but there's never an end to it. Like, we could do a Food for Thought series or Food for Thought 2, and
are
just
you thinking about that based on the reactions that you've had? You got the bug to do it again?
Well, we already did have as filmmakers. We're absolutely determined to continually create content, make films, and it's just a case of what. And of course, but you're absolutely right. Since the film came out, well, since the premiere, I should say, because it's not out yet, but since the premiere, I mean, we were blessed, because you do all this stuff we're talking about, where all of these driving factors behind why we're making the film, how we're trying to make it. You hope, you sit, behind the scenes editing it, and you hope it's going to look this way or that way, and that it's going to resonate in the ways that like the humor, as a good example. It's a hell of a balancing act, because if you get it wrong, it might be really disrespectful to the cause and to the people who care about it, and it could also just come across as not funny. So to hear people say, and not because we've said these are the things that are important to us, and they're going, oh yeah, well it was that and it was that. They're just volunteering this feedback and ticking every box for us, saying it's relatable, saying it's non-judgmental, saying it's funny. It has meant the world, and you can do everything you can to make the film as good as it can be, but until you actually put it out there into the world, you don't know. And so since we got that feedback, we're like, oh man, we've got to really ramp it up and do another one fast, and for a meaningful cause again. It needs to be something meaningful, because that's what makes it so important and special. It's not just.
Are you thinking the ideas now around that?
Yeah, we've been thinking about them for some time, and I don't mind sharing with you. Some of those ideas are, like, on the documentary side, it's a real sad reality. It's good in the sense that we've got plenty to choose from, but it's such a sad reality that there's no lack of subject matter. If I want to make the world a better place for animals,
100%.
Pick a subject. There's thousands, literally millions.
There's so many areas where animals are being, used for different purposes.
Right, and so it's an interesting balance again for us, in terms of what's something that's going to be broadly appealing, relevant, topical, but also meaningful and matters. And one of the things that I have in mind that I'd like to do something about is animals used in scientific experimentation. Because you quite confidently say that the vast majority of people would disagree with it in principle. but it's still happening. And that might seem weird to say that, but if you look at fox hunting as an example, we know in this country that about 12% of the population support fox hunting, and the rest of us don't. The rest of us think it's abhorrent and are very, very anti-fox hunting, but it still happens. How's that possible? It even happens despite there being laws in place to say it's not legal. It can only do trail hunting. And everyone knows there's loopholes that are exploited. I'd love to do a film about that. I'd like to rattle some cages. It could be that I put myself in a somewhat precarious position with the likes of the hunting fraternity, or let's say I was to take up a project exposing the cruelty of horse racing. You'd make some enemies along the way.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Really would.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me really thinks, okay,
Yeah.
I don't mind that, because it probably, I don't want to put myself in danger. I'm not pretending that I want to go to that extent, but
Yeah.
if you get a bit of controversy stirred up with the opposing force,
Yeah.
probably not a bad thing.
I was reading about horse racing, about like how they've bred horses just for speed, but their bone density isn't that strong, and effectively when they're doing the hurdles, their legs break.
Happens all the time.
And it's horrible, like just to hear stuff like that, how, for the cause of profit and money and entertainment, what we're doing to these animals, it's kind of nuts.
Well,
so it does
you've
need
hit
to
the
be
nail on the head.
exposed.
It's the money is why it's defended. It's the only reason. There's no question
Only
that it's
reason.
cruel.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look at a really good resource, and a really desperately upsetting resource, but very, very real and real time, is Animal Aid, that wonderful.
Yeah, they're brilliant, by the way. I'll tell you something about them that I'm considering.
Please.
It'd be good to get your thoughts on it. Yeah.
Please do. And Animal Aid, who very kindly partnered with us for the premiere, as you know, among other incredible, invaluable work that they do, created the Racehorse Death Watch website, which just sounds too horrific to be real, but it's a real thing.
Oh,
it's just a
right.
number. It just tells you the course, the date, and
Right.
the death.
Yeah,
the name of the
yeah.
horse that's died in it. And it's permanently going up, and it's thousands of horses. And this is just in the UK, never mind worldwide.
Yeah.
Just in the UK, there are thousands of horses that are killed either in training, on the course, as a result of injury, where they're just destroyed, and they bring a tarpaulin out onto the course and do it outside of public view because they know that people would be horrified if they saw that. And the only reason that's happening, there's nothing, that horse would comfortably survive, their broken leg would heal, but it would never race again, so it's not going to make any money for the owner, hence it's gone.
Yeah.
That's all it is, and it's disgusting. And so I'd love to take that on, and that's a film or an episode of something I'll do at some point. And I will make enemies along the way, and I'm sure I'll be threatened for it, but
Yeah.
bring it on.
They've just launched a new campaign called Terror on the Tables, and they aired this on national TV, commercial broadcast.
Just the other day, yeah.
Yeah, just to show what it's like. I mean, again, it's not showing the slaughter, but you're meant to put your position as the animal would be. The thing I wanted to mention is that I'm going to my daughter's school, old primary school, where they do a fantastic job at going to schools and doing education. I'm going to watch one of their volunteers go in and give a talk to the kids' primary school. They do secondary schools as well, to show compassion for animals, for example, and show some of their documentaries and stuff. So, yeah, I'm thinking about becoming one of their volunteers on the education.
Oh, what a wonderful idea.
Yeah, it just needs to start, doesn't it, with the young. So,
No,
they
100%.
understand that animals are individuals and they have feelings and they deserve a place to be on this planet, don't they?
Yeah, we're here. They're here with us, not for us. It's simple, isn't it? And it's one of the things that always fascinates me about human nature, and you can simplify this to such an extent that it seems oversimplified, and it seems too. It's like, well, but that's not going to solve everything. But it actually, I think it's fair to say every living organism, including human beings, benefits from compassion being more at the forefront. And it's just a fact. I mean, what society wouldn't benefit from a higher level of compassion for anything, for any species? And of course, and I've always also felt very strongly that compassion is not species specific. You don't find people who are compassionate towards animals and couldn't give a monkeys about people. If compassion is compassion, and it just benefits the individual and society as a whole. Everyone around that person benefits from a more compassionate individual. So I think you're absolutely right. People like Animal Aid and Born Free are very good with it as well, and lots of charities are, because they realise, exactly as you said, it starts early. And here's a really interesting way of looking at it. It's not a case of saying, let's teach compassion to kids as early as possible to get it in there. I think what happens is children are inherently compassionate. They're
100%.
unlearning. It's conditioned out of them.
Yeah, they
polluted
don't they
by the
don't
world.
get the connection.
Right.
You know, especially kids who are teenagers and they're growing up and, you know, their diets are terrible, fast food, you know,
Right. Right.
the places that we live, especially, you know, here in the UK where there's
Right.
probably a chicken shop on every corner, you know.
Yep.
So that's
Exactly.
lending to other things, childhood obesity levels rising. So it's all connected, isn't it? When you look at,
Indeed.
okay, if you start with the animals, start eating healthier, it will help our NHS so much more, relieve the pressure long term. So there's so many factors that sort of boil down to this one point that we just need to put more emphasis on it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you bring up the NHS as well, because it's a really easy example which allows me to highlight just how prevalent this thing called human nature is in the decisions we make. And what I mean by that is this. So we're talking about primarily veganism. We're talking about, you know, healthier diets and the benefits from that to us and to the animals and to the environment and everything else.
Yeah.
And the reason that's because you could argue, you could think, well, why would people not do it then? Like it's so obvious. But here's the reality of the world we live in, is that the two biggest burdens on the NHS, this isn't an opinion, this is just a fact. The two biggest burdens on the NHS are alcohol and tobacco. Those two things cause more sickness, disease, death, and are a bigger burden on the National Health Service than anything else. Both of which you can walk legally into a shop and buy both of them right now to your heart's desire. In fact, on one of them, when you buy it, it will say,
Warning label.
this will kill you. This is
Yeah.
going to shorten your life. And people go, yeah, I'll have 40 of those, please.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you think about it like that, you realize the power of human nature and free will. No one argues. No one's out there saying, nah, that's not true. Cigarettes are good for you. Like there are people saying meat's good for you. Everyone knows cigarettes kill you, and we have millions of people choose to buy them. They willingly shorten their life and make their quality of life lower, knowing this thing's going to essentially kill them or certainly not help them. They do it anyway. Same with alcohol. These are just facts. That's why I think it's really important for us to. It's a sad reality, isn't it? But I think it's super important for us to, whenever we're having these conversations, when we're making films, when we're serving the cause in whatever way we serve the cause, to realise that that's the baseline we're dealing with here, which is absolutely extraordinary when you think about it in those simple terms. But it's real. And so it's not enough for people to, even if you could prove it, which has been done with cigarettes, prove that eating less meat is going to make you live longer and healthier. They're choosing cigarettes. Of course they're going to choose meat. We have to keep those sorts of things in mind and deal with the reality. It's, you know, I wish we could just simplify it and make our lives a lot easier.
Yeah, like you say, I mean, there's people who still buy it, even they see the warning labels. I think when they did introduce the warning labels, there was definitely a decline of people having it. So with that in mind, do you think meat should have a warning label?
Yes, I do. I completely do. And it's, I think this is where it gets very controversial. I think the reason it doesn't is because of lobbying from the farming community, the meat industry, the dairy industry, because these things can be proven to be bad for you. So, red meat, for example, is, and I'm going to be very careful how I word this because it's important to get this right. Red meat is what's in America known as a level 1 carcinogenic, meaning it's cancer causing.
Yeah, and this was done by the World Health Organization, by the way.
Right.
So it's been documented many years ago. Yeah.
Correct. And just to be clear, what level 1 means, because that puts it in the same category as tobacco and asbestos. Right?
Yeah.
That's not to suggest for one moment that if you were to consume a chunk of asbestos, a piece of red meat is going to have the same impact on your body. Clearly, that's not the case. What level 1 means in the American system is that it has that much evidence to demonstrate that it is carcinogenic. It's the level of evidence that's available, the level of proof that's available. So it's proven beyond any doubt, just like asbestos is bad for us, that red meat is bad for us. However, if you go on to I can't remember the exact acronym for it, I think it's the American Cancer Association, the ACA, or something very much like that. As a recommended meal on their website, you'll find red meat. So they're on the cancer sufferers resource for how you can achieve the best quality of life if you're suffering from cancer. They're knowingly proposing that you eat a carcinogenic food. That's what we're up against. So that's why I don't think we're anywhere close to a warning label on meat just yet, because there's clearly something at play there where there's a lobby taking place that prevents that from happening. Yeah, that's just the reality of.
They're just too powerful where they fund specific researchers and help them exist as an organisation. And it's just counterintuitive to what they're doing.
Indeed, it probably has to start with regulations in terms of how much, if anything, these people are allowed to contribute to government and particular individuals within government, because that's, it's like the NRA, isn't it? It's like the whole gun thing. The reason guns is, again, that's another example of where it's just what? Surely it's just the most obvious thing in the world is just make it harder to get guns and reduce the number of them. The reason that's not the case is because everyone's continually being convinced that they're a brilliant idea, and that the NRA is responsible for that, because they've got the millions and millions of dollars available to them to lobby the decision makers. So they do. Same is absolutely true of meat.
Yeah.
And dairy.
Yeah, exactly. And so in a way, the plant-based industry just hasn't got enough resources, the same money, power to influence in the same ways. But it's growing, our vertical is, there's more and more. So there's the good signs where people are becoming, here in the UK, 4 or 5% now of the population is vegan, plant-based, and there's a huge amount that are flexitarians, vegetarians, that I think will be the next easier ones to sort of speak to come on the journey a bit quicker. So I want to thank you so much for the documentary.
Thank you.
It was amazing. Encourage everyone to go watch it. I really hope that you continue, and the series that you do, or if you're looking at the animal and experiments side, and the horse racing would be amazing. I don't think those two areas have been covered enough as well. Yeah, great work that you're doing as the Patron work, and being part of those foundations as well. And just, brilliant. You're a brilliant guy.
My friend, thank you so much. I mean, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, and thank you for what you're doing. I love the way you're spreading the message and helping the cause yourself. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for having me on as a guest. It's a pleasure to chat with you again.
That's great. And hopefully see you again soon.
I'll look forward to that.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Anand.
See you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.